in the function room watching this as well. Ideally, anybody who wishes to speak in public questions is in this room. If you're not and you're watching in another part of the campus, please make sure that you kind of come over in the next 30 minutes and make yourself known. So, good evening all. We do run a fairly tight ship and we'll try and keep this to time. We'll go through each agenda as clear as we can. If anybody doesn't understand what's going on, please indicate. It's also an opportunity for members and the public at the appropriate stage to ask questions rather than go into speeches. I may give a little latitude as chair of the committee, but you need to get to your point fairly quickly as that happens. So we'll move on to apologies for absence, please.
From Councillor Shake's chair, Councillor Jane Milner-Barry is deputising.
Good evening. Number 2 is declarations of interest. All members are reminded at the start of the meeting, as we do at every meeting, that if you believe you have a personal or prejudicial interest that needs to be declared in any item that we are discussing either now or during the course of the meeting, please. Does any member wish to indicate an interest at the start of the meeting? Councillor Adams.
Just for personal interest, that I was one of the members that put this in for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? We'll move swiftly on to public question time. So, rather than the usual time limit that we have, we've agreed with committee services that we'll have 30 minutes of public questions, and we'll see how we progress at that point. This is more about councillors scrutinising the cabinet decision through the calling process, so I'm afraid we're not going to be extending it to an hour, 2 hours, like we did at cabinet, because the meat of the meeting is very much going through the report now. Are there any members of the public who wish to ask questions? Okay, if I could take you from front to back. So, gentleman in the shirt, if you'd like to come to the centre seat, and if one of our colleagues could turn it on, please. Thank you. For the record, confirm your name and where you live and ask your questions.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Robin Clegg. I'm a resident of Highworth and of the borough of Swindon. Chair, I'd like to refer to the papers in front of you to do with this call proposed. My main question is, given that in the committee's terms of reference, section C3, the committee should ensure that Swindon Borough Council has sound decision-making procedures, then why is the committee ruling out most of the allegations from the Highworth Borough councillors here today? That's section 3.6 in the main papers. After all, they are very much to do with sound decision-making processes. I'll add to that, if this committee is not particularly in the soundness of decision-making processes, which committee is it?
So, thank you for your point. This is something that I have discussed with officers, and it's quite clear there is a difference when it comes to the process the council follows and what we do have as a remit in decision-making with cabinet and the individual conduct of councillors. Now, there is kind of a blurred line in some aspects, but for this committee, there's a very clear separation that conduct is the standards committee and outside of this meeting, anything to do with the content of the report, the options, how that decision has been reached, is very much in scope of what we're dealing with. It's for the committee to decide what the next steps are, and the 3 available options are listed in the committee report. And hopefully, as we go through the evening, you'll kind of see how we go through that process, and there will be a vote at the end about which recommendations to take forward.
May I have one supplementary, please? I really would argue that several of the items listed at 3.6 from our own borough councillors are very much to do with sound decision-making processes. I don't believe it's possible to argue they're all to do with conduct. And definitely in your terms of reference, I think you really should consider the soundness of the decision-making process in June the 4th Cabinet.
Thank you. I will ask the legal officer just to reiterate the council's position on this, because it is that aspect of what's legal and sound and what is a decision versus what is personal conduct as councillors and how they reach those. So from my understanding, but I'll ask the person to mention it.
Thank you, Chair. It's set out in the report to the committee what is in scope of the committee and what isn't in scope.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
It's set out within the report what is in scope of this committee and what isn't in scope of the committee. Lawfulness of the decision in and of itself, as expressed by Mr. Clegg, would be a matter for the courts, not a matter for this overview scrutiny committee, who will be looking at the decision in its entirety, alternatives as set out on the papers.
Okay. The second row, there's a lady on my right. Again, you for the record, from the name and ask your question.
My name's Hayley Powell. That's with Highworth. I would just like to point out, perhaps from a slightly different perspective, however, it's really points already mentioned. So yes, I would like to bring to all of your attention item 3.6 in the agenda. So this is an observation of the agenda, the structure and its layout, not the items themselves, which has been stated they are out of the remit of tonight's scrutiny committee. But ask a question about the scrutiny committee's process on the subject of the council's process that took place on the 4th of June. I want to list at least 2 items, not all of them. Most notably, cabinet members, and I quote, cabinet members admitted to failing to read the report or ask any questions but still voted on a report they know nothing about, and that is what in the agenda, end quote. This point is, to my mind, about process. And I would like to ask the scrutiny committee, specifically the scrutiny committee, not the cabinet members, can they see the logic that this point is about process and not conduct of code of conduct only? Perhaps code of conduct, yes, but certainly process as well. However, so if we take the simple example, make it very plain, tram driver who fails to read his train driver manual, is that code of conduct or failing to do his job properly? Is it about his process? I think we can all agree it's about not doing his job. Also, the second point, and I quote, the leader failed to count the votes before announcing the decision. Again, easy to understand comparison. If a teacher marks a paper without counting the marks at the end to assess the student's score, is that their conduct or is that their self as a teacher? I think it's clearly that process, isn't it? Many of these points that are being omitted, I have to say, by the scrutiny committee are clearly about process and not just their code of conduct. And I would like to ask the scrutiny committee for yes or no opinion towards seeing the logic that these points are indeed about process of cabinet on the 4th of June 2020.
Thank you. I'll ask the Chief Legal Officer to comment on this as the key council officer who is providing us with the legal advice to particularly answer your points. I'm sure we've got all our views. I'll go through that as the committee agenda item goes through, but I need the council legal officer to give us the official answer to your points.
So just to be clear, the scrutiny committee would not like to answer yes or no to those questions, to that question.
The question is directed to myself as chair to answer in the best way rather than each individual member of the committee. And the best way to answer that is through the legal advice to the council. If we are going against the legal advice of the council, then that opens up different set of kind of worms. Appreciate you might not like my answer in terms of a yes, no, but this is how we all kind of run overview scrutiny meetings and indeed when it comes to cabinet. So I'll ask Lisa to comment on your particular points, which were failing to read the report and failing to count the vote.
Thank you, Chair. As stated previously, the decision of the Cabinet is a lawful decision until such time as it may be appropriately challenged through the courts. It isn't part of the scrutiny remit to determine the legality or otherwise of the scrutiny of the Cabinet's decision. It is a matter for scrutiny to scrutinise the substance of the decision and the alternative options as set out in the papers. Nothing more to add, Chair, than that clarification.
And can I just have one supplementary?
Of course.
I would like to ask, is the Scrutiny Committee aware of breaches of the Members' Code of Conduct? Examples of breaches of misusing information to avoid scrutiny.
Members of the committee.
Excuse me, I haven't finished my system. Which would be, as I've stated, in the previous question, misusing information to avoid scrutiny or to act dishonestly without integrity, and furthermore, possible abuse of public trust.
Thank you. This committee and its membership wouldn't be involved in specific standards cases, and it would be treated as confidential until there is an outcome if one was underway. Again, I will defer to the Chief Legal Officer on this particular point to make sure that we're kind of giving you the correct answer. But members of this committee would not normally be involved in reviewing cases unless they're members of the standards committee.
So just to be clear, you're not responsible for any decision making made tonight.
Chair, I think in order to be helpful, the Council's constitution and indeed legislation sets out that members' code of conduct is a matter for the Code of Conduct and the Standards Committee, and this does not fall within the remit of scrutiny. It's also important to point out that everybody is entitled to a view as to matters occur at a meeting, but until those views are considered by a appropriate body, for example, the Standards Committee, then they are simply views of a person who's expressing them.
Have any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. I think on the other side of the room, there was somebody else on the second row. Okay, if you prefer your name and your questions.
Councillor Judy Murphy, Chair of Highworth Town Council. This is a supplementary question to the previous one submitted last Friday and relating to the restriction of only 10 hectares being developable on the site. So thank you for your response. However, Highworth Town Council remains seriously concerned by the omission of key evidence in the decision-making process regarding the former golf course. Whilst we acknowledge that the Regulation 19 was not adopted, the accompanying sustainability appraisal clearly identified only 10 hectares of a site as potentially suitable for development. This evidence was produced as part of the formal plan-making process and should have carried material weight in subsequent strategic considerations. Given this, we ask, why was this evidence not presented to Cabinet by officers when recommending a significant expenditure for pre-application work on site? Why did Cabinet approve option 3, proposing approximately 700 houses, despite this earlier assessment indicating far more limited development capacity? Shouldn't this evidence have ruled out option 3 entirely at an early stage, therefore thereby avoiding unnecessary expenditure? And will this previous evidence now be properly reviewed as part of the site's detailed evaluation? And if not, on what planning basis is it being disregarded? We believe the failure to properly consider this existing evidence undermines both the credibility of the site evaluation process and the integrity of the decision-making framework.
Thank you for your question. I'll direct it to Councillor Small as the
Thank you, Chair.
member.
To answer the question, or supplementary question, that which was put in writing, as part of the report that came to Cabinet, it was consultants were engaged. They were engaged in two sets of consultants. One was the ecology consultant, the other one was the development consultant, and they looked into the possibilities of the option 2 and 3. Option 2 and 3, therefore, were based on their assessment of what was available or what was achievable, based on current planning laws, rather than what was set when the previous assessment was done, which is over 4 years ago. The pre-planning application process would actually deal with all of the issues that's been raised in the supplementary question about whether or not the existing advice of 4 years ago is prevalent today, or whether or not a 700 or something in the middle is acceptable as a way going forward for development. It might even come back and say there's no development possible on that site. That may be the advice of the pre-planning process, which we have now entered into if this decision is approved this evening by the Scrutiny Committee. I would also point out that the local plan, as it said at Regulation 19, didn't get passed by council, wasn't taken on by council, and as you will notice in the last week's cabinet paper, the draft regulation is going forward to council next week doesn't include any development on the Highworth or course site.
Yes, please. On the basis of what you said, can you confirm that you've actually evaluated the changes to the MPPF and any other policies that affect the decision making, so that you've actually been able to rule out the sustainability appraisal would not be effective now?
The pre-planning will deal with all those issues we just raised, and we took the advice of the consultants, which was part of the work we've done over the last year.
I think I saw another hand on the third row. Was that 2 hands? Leave the glasses on their head, please.
Thank you. My name's April Rush. I'm a resident of Swindon Borough Council and part of the action group. Firstly, I think I just want to make a statement that what the Scrutiny Committee, and just remind the public what you are representing and representing the public, myself and everyone here, by raising issues of concern, challenging poor decisions and holding councillors and officers to account. And following the meeting on 4th of June, I think you've got an opportunity here that I trust that this council can really carefully reconsider the scope of the Scrutiny Committee remit and ensure that public trust is upheld. You have that opportunity to do that tonight, and I sincerely hope that you do that. My question to you, and I quote a few pieces, you'll probably know these acronyms more than myself, but Local Government Act, the LGA 2019, CFGS and Centre for Governance Scrutiny, and I quote here that Scrutiny has the remit to investigate, scrutinise decisions made by councillors, including not reading a report prior to a vote. This falls directly within the role of scrutiny to ensure transparency, accountability and good governance. This is in black and white across all of those government sites, and I don't think there is a clearer example, and these are quoted examples of exactly what falls into scrutiny and what falls in code of conduct. These are in black and white. So my question to you is, given that the council is admitting to not reading the report prior to voting on it, how does this council justify that this decision meets the standard of informed decision making, transparency and accountability? And on what grounds does this Scrutiny Committee claim that this is outside the remit to investigate what its role is precisely to examine the integrity of decision-making processes?
Okay, Thank you. I'll do the. Thank you. We've also got some sound issues in the function room, so hopefully you can speak clearly into the microphones if you do tonight. To answer your first point, the scope of this committee is set by the full council through the adopted constitution. If we wish to amend the scope of the committee, it requires those discussions and a further vote of the council. In terms of your main point, I will need to ask the Chief Legal Officer to answer.
Sorry, the sound issues you were talking about, I think it's something to do with there's more than one microphone. So if you leave your microphone on, then that causes an echo, which might be causing that.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know the specific guidance that the speaker was referring to.
Do you want me to repeat those?
And there are a number of generic guidances referenced.
These are not generic, these are government.
If you could let the officer comment.
It remains my view, Chair, that the specifics as to the actual decision making of the cabinet decision and its lawfulness are not matters for this committee, and they are matters for alternative forums as set out in the report, as set out in my previous answers.
And we go to your, if you've got any supplementaries.
Could I just come back on that, because
I'll give you an opportunity to give a spiritual moment. I think the other part to this is it would be useful to wait and see what questions come out from members in the main agenda item to really see the level of detail and scrutiny that may or may not take place. So it's easy to say something now in this session about what the council does, but we do need to wait for the main committee and grilling of the relevant cabinet members to really say anything. Do you want these supplementaries?
Yep, okay, thank you. So what I would like is I would like this council, Scrutiny Committee, to detail the specific constitutional or legal basis upon which the council has determined this matter to be outside the scrutiny remit.
I think we're very happy to see that you have a formal written response to that point, and that answer is provided to all members of the committee to make sure it is in writing.
Can that not be answered now?
I'm happy to ask the Chief Legal Officer to comment, but I think with the thoroughness, I think it would be best to ensure that it's a written response to that point. Lisa, anything further to add?
No, Chair.
Ask another or not? Okay, I'll come back.
So another lady at the back in the green top. And then come back down to the front.
My name is Vicky McKnight. I am a resident of Swindon Borough Council, Swindon Borough and of Highworth. I want to look at the process and looking at the failure to consider other viable options. Highworth Town Council business plan and the council's own ecology consultant both supported the nature reserve option for the old golf course. Yet no indicative plan has been prepared or viability assessment was produced for option 1. There was, however, detailed layouts were prepared for both option 2 and option 3. Furthermore, during the cabinet meeting on the 4th of June, there was no meaningful discussion. In fact, there was no discussion from any other member of the cabinet about options at all. The only 2 cabinet members that spoke were Councillor Small and Councillor Robbins. Therefore, how can this be considered a fair or lawful process when one option was so clearly under-examined?
Thank you. I'll ask Councillor Small to comment, but that is one of the reasons behind the call-in process from councillors to mean that we are here tonight. So we'll go into that further in the main session. But Councillor Small, anything to wish to add at the moment?
I referred first of all to the appendix 3, sorry, appendix number appendix within the report, pages 35 to 92, which is an options appraisal, open space feasibility study, and options appraisal relating to the Highworth golf course. There's a comprehensive report provided as part of the papers and also by the ecology consultant. We deliberately employed 2 consultants as part of the consideration of options 1, 2 and 3. One to look at the viability of what to do with option 1, and the other one to look at the 2 options, and therefore the report actually covers more of the option 1 than it does of the other 2 options. We looked at the various details, and they're outlined the options from country park to do nothing, a medium situation where you've done park, country park, nature reserve. All those were looked into and listed as well as part of the report. So I do actually accept that there was the work wasn't done on option 1.
I do. Following on from that point, I appreciate the report. I read it and I thought it led very beautifully to the fact that it should become a nature reserve. So my question is, why therefore was that option not debated on the night? Why, for example, did we not hear from our Environment Council when a nature reserve is at its actual heart of protecting our environment? Why do we only hear from our Finance and Assets Officer?
Responsibility of the report was mine, Chair, and mine to present the report as the report comes in my name. I've been involved with this issue for the full year, if not longer, before it's first in Cabinet, and I'm well acquainted with the various options and also what the Town Council are hoping to achieve on the old golf course site. And so therefore I think I'm well placed to be able to present the 3 options to the Cabinet, and the job of the Cabinet member to present reports, not officers.
Councillor Vine has indicated as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to try and explain a little bit about how the Cabinet meetings work. So I've always struggled with the concept of Cabinet meetings because we have our discussions in private ahead of those meetings, and the Cabinet meet on a regular basis to discuss the issues that are facing the Cabinet and issues that are on our forward plan that are going to come for discussion. And then we have sessions that we call political cabinet, where it's just the elected members who are in the room. And we also have sessions which we call informal cabinet, where we're joined by officers from the council as well, who give us advice and guidance. And by the time we get to a cabinet meeting, we have discussed that issue a number of times. We've had a number of briefings on it. We're fully up to speed with exactly what the conversations are. And we make our decisions in private, and then the cabinet meeting is more the performative, formal decision-making process that we go through. And the important bit for us at the cabinet meeting that we had back in June was spending the time listening to the residents of Highworth. And we took time, and then when we got to the formal bit of it, it was clear that no one from the cabinet raised any issue, because we felt that we had debated it and understood the issues enough that we could make that decision. And I think it's, in hindsight, I think it would have been better if we had tried to replay some of the discussions that we had in private ahead of the meeting in that room so that people could have seen them. And I think that might have given you the reassurance that you were looking for. And I think there is some learning for us to take away about how we approach cabinet meetings, because what we find, I think, is we discuss the issue so much when we come to the cabinet meeting and the formal papers come forward. We've done our debate and we understand where we are on the issue, but obviously that isn't what we convey to people who were there in the audience at that meeting. So I think there is some learning for us to do.
Can I come back on that? So that to me seems to make a bit of a mockery of the public question time if that doesn't then elicit a debate. Because we come to the table with maybe different bits of information than you perhaps discussed, some visions that you haven't seen before, and therefore I would expect most human beings would then react to something that's brought up that hasn't been thought about. So that smacks to me a little bit that
the decision had been made before the meeting.
I don't think it was the case that the decision was made before the meeting. No, we have come to a conclusion. We've had our debates in private. That is the way that we work. That is how the cabinet has always worked. And I think that the situation that we're in is all we were saying is that we wanted to go forward with option 3 and have that investigated by going through the pre-planning process so that they could look into it. That is not a decision that we are going to build houses on Highworth Golf Course. We have not made a decision that we're going to build houses on Highworth Golf Course. We made a decision that we're going to go through a pre-planning process to investigate what is the possibility of that. When it comes back to the cabinet and we make a final decision, we will have that this debate in public, and you will be able to witness it. You'll be able to come and ask this question again. But I don't think that there was anything that was given to us in that public question time that gave me any reason for us not to go ahead and do that sort of investigation, which is why I made the decision that I did.
Thank you for that. The lady in the front and the gentleman in the black t-shirt.
Hello, my name is Sheila Pregnall and I too am a resident of Highworth in Swindon. I think my questions have been answered now, so I have a point to make about the fact that it is impossible to hear what's going on in the room that we have been in. So half of this meeting we have not been able to hear. So my question is, why were we not in a room where we could all be together? There are plenty of rooms, as I know, here in this building, which could have accommodated all of us. So why were plenty of us pushed into a side room where we couldn't hear what was going on?
So thank you for your question. This is the meeting room for this committee, and there's a strong preference that we keep it this way, particularly with the room layout. It avoids a very combative style of scrutiny and discussion. It was a conversation about whether we move into the full council chamber, and we were assured that the function room had been set up to allow yourselves and other members of the public to hear those conversations. And about 15 minutes ago, we had a note about sound quality in that room, which is why I made a point of making sure that everybody was speaking clearly into the microphones. I'll ensure that after the meeting, we do raise it with community services and council to find out what is going on with that, because say it should be accessible to all members if that's where we move people to.
Well, of course, it's too. Thank you. But of course, it is now too late because we missed it. And my understanding is that you were told that there were likely to be quite a few people from Highworth coming to this meeting. Therefore, I would have thought that there could have been enough flexibility to ensure that we were included in a room large enough to accommodate us all. Thank you.
Thank you. And the there you go.
Hi, my name is Ian Durham Duffy. I'm on Highworth Town Council and I also worked in local authorities for 35 odd years before. It's an observation really, rather than a big question. Councillor Small stated that from pages 35 to 92, I think, were to do with the ecology report, but then over half the committee admitted they'd not looked at the report. How the hell did that decision? Sorry, there was a show of hands and half of them said they hadn't read it. I was there.
So were we.
Can we avoid this complete question directed to myself as the chair, and I'll ask the leader to respond to this point.
Thank you very much. I think that there's a lot of weight being put into this idea that people didn't read the papers. And I think it's a total red herring.
The deputy Labour leader said she didn't, and we have that on video.
If I can finish, I'll try and explain the situation.
Yes.
So the question was asked by someone from the audience. It wasn't a formal question that was asked by the chair of the meeting. Some people responded to it and some people didn't. And that is for people, they don't have to respond to people shouting out from the audience. Now, I'm 100% certain, because of the situation I set out in my previous answer about the process that we went through, where we looked at the evidence that came forward to us. We had a number of political cabinets where we talked about Highworth Golf Course. We had a number of informal cabinets where we talked about Highworth Golf Course. We had a cabinet agenda review session where we go through all of the papers ahead of the meeting. The idea that people are going into it and say that they have no knowledge of the subject is simply not true. It isn't anything to get fixated on. It is not the issue. I think that when some of the cabinet members were saying that they hadn't looked at all the papers, they were saying that they couldn't necessarily be asked what is on page 76 and be able to repeat it. But they've gone through it, they've had the discussions about it, they've had the briefings on it, and had a number of discussions at various council meetings. I really think it's a red herring, and I don't think that it is going to...
That is complete.
I'm afraid you
bollocks.
could.
I absolutely have to say.
Otherwise, I'm going to ask you to leave.
I am livid. I am a member of public, and you are supposed to be scrutinising councillors that are not unfair and unjust. And I'm
afraid that this is public questions, and if you kind of carry interrupting answers, I will need to ask you to leave. And I haven't done that in the last 3 years as chair, and I really don't want to start that tonight. So if everybody can kind of keep their emotions contained on this one, and we'll go through to the main debate shortly. But this is public questions and directing it to Councillor Robbins at the moment. Is there anything further you wish to?
Just to address the other point that was raised earlier on in the meeting about counting of votes. Again, I think this is a red herring. We got to the point in the meeting where the votes were cast. I asked people to put their hands up. I looked one way and saw that the 4 people to my left who voted. I looked to the other way and saw that the 5 people to my right had voted. There were audible gasps in the room as members of the public reacted to the vote that had been cast, and I announced it. The idea that I didn't count it properly just seems ridiculous to me. I really don't understand it. It was a unanimous vote that everyone in the room could see. People were arguing about it and shouting about it at the same time trying to announce it. So the idea that it wasn't clear that people had voted just doesn't make sense. It just feels like another red herring to me.
What should they?
If you have a supplementary, sir.
Yeah, I do, because I don't actually see what that had to do with my question, why you're saying that now. You're going to be answering my question. And it's obviously interpreted completely differently from the 100 people that were facing you in the room that saw people say they had not read the document. Now, I just think that's imperative to read something if you're going to be prepared for something. And it's no good Councillor Watts, I think his name is, shaking his head next to me, because that's not what he's going to do, that's unprofessional. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, we've got one gentleman I'd like to come, which is to my right. We are now at 40 minutes, so unless there's anybody particularly indicating, I will close public questions after this. So we've got one lady at the back and then we'll close.
Hi, my name is Rob New. I'm a resident. I'm a Swindon Borough Council. The cabinet decision on the 4th of June was made on just a recommendation. I'm slightly wondering whether I should even bother asking a question, because certainly from what happened on the 4th of June, the questions that were asked, no one was really listening to what we had to say.
So if you could kind of talk into the microphone.
Okay. I'm suddenly wondering if I should even bother asking the question, because I'm pretty sure, based on previous Borough Council meetings I've attended, just like this, that virtually everything anyone says is just ignored. Or almost is ignored. You give us the chance to ask questions, you push out consultation after consultation, but seem to then just ignore the people you're here to serve. And it's not a good place to be. Anyway, I'll go ahead with my question. It's a historic question, bearing in mind that the decision to go to push forward 100 houses was made on the pre-house. In 1973, when the old golf course land was purchased for leisure and recreation, the covenant was based on the land to protect. protect the hilltop end of Highworth and open sport. In 1990, I expect officers would have recommended councillors accept the proposal to build a golf course, providing a continuation of the very same level of protection. In 2013, officers recommended that to protect these very same leisure facilities, that the running of the golf course be outsourced to Tree Market with a 25-year lease. The recommendation accepted and the protection of the land continued. Tree Market also took on the Highworth course, knowing it was loss making at that time. Again, this information was provided by the officers. However, in 2019, I believe the very same officers, as per the 2013 decision, would have recommended that Tree Market be allowed to close the golf course, removing the protection that had been in place for 46 years. Why? I know it's a different administration today, but it's the same officers making those recommendations. Then, in 2020, officers will have recommended plans, probably the same officers, to build 350 houses on the golf course. That protection is now gone. So to be told that the reason to sell the land for housing today is to help get Swindon Borough Council out of the financial mess that they have today is just a lie. You know that officers have been pushing for houses on the golf course since 2019 or even before. So my main question is, do you ever question or scrutinise the recommendations made by officers, as there is a level of inconsistency in the information that they provide to you in order for you to make the decisions? And the decision was made on the
Thank you for your question. The first part is a simple yes. That does happen when it comes to challenging officers' information and what the recommendations are. It isn't always the case that what is recommended include, I mean, I've examples of that, not just in this year, but over the years. But I'll ask Councillor Small to answer this particular point.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, on the officers, right, is that in the end, it's these councillors that make the decision, not officers. And we're the only ones who can give an opportunity to answer back. So, and I understand your frustration, but having us rather than officers would be what I would personally say. And I know you were for saying that we didn't follow their advice. So there is a set, the order you go, if you go back to 2013 and everything else, the turnover of officers in that in the last 12 to 15 years has been quite a large amount. So there's very few officers around nowadays which were there when some of these decisions were made. That the issue on Twit itself being very close would have been done with through a different set of department officers to that of what we're dealing with at the present time. So there are different areas. But just to clarify that particularly, yeah.
You do know that.
It is because one would be done on the leisure side, the other be done on the property side. So they are different officers. Going back to your point, I think the chair has made we do always follow officers. No, we don't. And you only have to look at our planning decision for that. This is a prime example. But I would say that we have looked into some of the issues you raised. I know at the last meeting there was a written question which raised something. So I don't know if you Robert raised them, but several of those points were raised and then were answered as part of the answers, part of the process. So yes, we do make our own mind up based on it, and officers are challenged as part of this process as well, outside of the meeting and inside the meeting along the way. And officers will probably tell you that I'm one of the biggest challenges, sometimes the biggest pain in the neck when it comes to officer recommendations. It can be. So can I just go to one point? I know that at the beginning you said, I know you're expressing your frustrations, and I took a bit to heart when you said, but they're not listening to the questions we put. I'm like, I covered over an hour and 3/4 of the questions at the last meeting. Every one of those questions I genuinely answered and tried to answer it as a individual question. It wasn't any answer I gave at any one time. So I was a little bit wounded by that accusation, because I felt that I did, well, you might not agree with the answers. I did try to answer every question generally as an individual question.
Yeah. I'd just like to come back on that to say that I appreciate your answers, but I don't feel that your answers on that evening answered the questions that were going to ask. It felt like you weren't really listening to what people had to say. It felt like you already made your mind up in terms of what you were going to do, and it was almost pointless for us to be there.
One, it wasn't pointless you've been there, and two, every answer that was given was a genuine answer to the question that was put forward, and what I believe to be the correct answer to give to that question. And it was, to me, answer those questions in full.
Thank you, sir. There's a lady at the back, if you'd like to come forward. I'll just remind everybody that questions and answers should be directed to the chair, not across the table, and individuals.
Apologies, Richard. I was to blame for that.
Mr. Chairman, just a very brief point. One, I want to say how very disappointed I am in the new Labour Council. How dare you treat a town like you have? What on earth is the point of us coming to these meetings? Because it says predetermination. We had decided, we had a meeting and decided this. We had a meeting and determined that. What's the point? We've done it all. We may as well go to the very end. I expected better, and were a huge disappointment to the people of Highworth. That is all.
I'm afraid I won't take up perhaps Robin's pledge of joining Labour. We're closing public. Is that going there? Do I have to come? One final question. We'll then move on to the main topic of the night. We'll ask the committee whether they are minded to support relocating this issue to the chamber, and breaking for 5 minutes to support that to happen. So if I'd like to confirm your name and your question, please.
Hello, my name is Oliver Johnson. I'm a resident from Highworth. My question I would like to ask is, can someone please elaborate on what discussions were placed before the meeting on the 4th of June?
Robbins?
Firstly, can I thank you for your question and congratulate you on the assembly you had at the school. You asked the question of the meeting. Well done. Always good to see young people join in the democratic process. In terms of those discussions, we went through a number of discussions at various points to make sure that the councillors were aware of the options that were on the table, the different bits of information that were being brought to us, understanding of the appendices. We didn't make a final decision ahead of the meeting. That isn't how this works. The final decision is the one that is made formally when we make that at the cabinet meeting. But we certainly discussed the options. We spoke to the Labour group about it. So that's the other councillors within the Labour group to get their opinion, to make sure that we had a unified approach to the subject. And we were trying to get as many voices into those discussions and decision making as possible. But the final decision was made in the chamber on that.
Anything else to ask about?
No, thank you, Basil.
Thank you. Okay. So everybody take part in public questions. The next item on the agenda is around the call-in request. I'm just going to defer quickly to committee services around of relocating, because I've just been informed that we won't be able to answer. So committee services are indicating that if we pause and relocate, the live stream may not function, so they just want to check that before it happens, and then we'll come back and ask to see if you support moving to the chamber or staying here and continuing the debate. So we'll have 2 minutes while officers figure that out. Turn to the main session. The short version is that the IT doesn't allow us to do the alternative menu, and it looks like the live stream is perfectly acceptable for sound quality. It's something to do with speakers in the function room. I'll have to pick that up with the administration of this session. However, the members of the public who are still here, we're going to find additional seating for you to attend, so should carry on in this meeting room. Item 4 of the agenda covers exempt items where we exclude the press and public. certain items are private and confidential and we can't discuss in open session. So in our conversations and discussions and questions, please try and keep what you ask and what you say in response open as possible without prompting us to go into a closed session. Because if that happens, everybody in the public and the press will need to leave the room while we have that debate. If it does need to, as part of our conversations, then please try and reserve your questions to the very end of the meeting, so it isn't disrupted in terms of having to open and close the meeting. We have done this quite successfully in the past, so just please be mindful. And if I need to, I will try and step in and veer into that territory. But let's try and keep this as open, visible to the public as possible in how we answer. Are members happy that in accordance with section 104 of the LGA 1962 Act, as set out in the agenda item 4, that if you need to discuss any exempt information, that it moves into private conversation? Are all happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 5 is the main point of tonight's meeting, which is the calling request of Cabinet's decision on the future use of the former Highworth golf course. Convention is that we ask the Cabinet member of the report to open the item, and is there anything that you wish to set the context, and then we'll move to the I think member points, starting with water councillors. So Councillor Small.
Thank you, Chair. I would say in opening up this debate that basically you've got to remember that this wasn't just this report that went to the Cabinet meeting. This was the product of an initial report which went back to the previous 12 months to the July 2024. The item was raised at Cabinet then because of a motion put forward by the 3 Highworth ward councillors, the full council, which was referred to Cabinet. But also during that 12 months, the number of meetings were held, discussed what the way forward and the 3 options for consideration. And a lot of work has gone into coming up with those 3 options and the report that went in front of the Cabinet last month. The Council looked at various things that we looked at. Also, the 3 mission statements were looked at and was evaluated on those. The 3 options were evaluated on those 3 missions, and also we had looked at the benefits of the 3 options, and also in actual terms, like the benefit of having green open space, and against that of the financial benefits to the council. Now, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and that's why the decision of the Cabinet is to go for the pre-planning application stage. So a lot of those questions can be answered, and a report can come back to Cabinet on whether or not there is a viability for option 3, which is the 700 houses. Can I point out also, Chair, that what shouldn't be forgotten is that even the option 3, that over 50%, and you see it's 58 of the site will still be open space or a nature reserve once those houses are being built. So therefore, a large proportion of the option 3 does retain a large proportion for green open space within the existing site. So those are the areas that we would take into consideration. Looking at the report that you've got in front of you this evening, Chair, it comes to one option. What is it? Why haven't we discussed these lease of these for 7 years to the then council? And that is quite an easy one to answer, and that is that the business plan put by the town council was based on then getting grants and funding when they applied for grants to help support the development of the nature reserve. Now, a lot of those grants were based on the fact that they needed occupancy for a 25-year period, and the town council made it quite clear to us that they needed to trigger those applications. They needed that longer lease for the site, and that is why the 7-year option was rejected, because it served no one no good. it would not achieve what was wanted to be achieved by the town council or the people of Highworth in trying to preserve a long-term nature reserve for the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, I'm very councillors, I'm going to ask my first question because it's on this particular point, and then I'm going to come to you. So, Councillor Small, in July 2024 for Council, there was a standing order 15 question asked, which was, are you willing to meet with all councillors in Highworth Town Council within 30 days to discuss at least up to 7 years, Highworth Town Council to at least a former golf course and report the outcomes next for Council? And your written response was, as mentioned above, the council is considering the future use of the golf course, and this is set out in the report. In the circumstances, while this work is ongoing, it is not appropriate to meet with all councillors and town councillors to discuss this for up to 7 years. A year later, you're saying that because the town council did not ask about the lease.
You're wrong. I said that's not what I said, Chair. I said we had a discussion on many occasions with the town council over the last year, and it was made clear by the representatives of the town council that a 7-year lease would not serve their business plan, where they needed a minimum of 25 years, some maybe 20, between 20 and 25 years to trigger the grants required by Campbell University. Some of the other, I think it may have been, I think it's burial ground as well. I may be wrong on that one, but there was several grants that they could apply for, but they had to be long-term grants because there was a long-term cost, but long-term benefit, which could not be seen within the 7 years. It would take a 25-year period to achieve it.
So why wasn't that information in the report?
Because the 3 options which were looked at was what the report required to.
Ward councillors, who would like to start? Councillor Wisinger.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm sure you're aware, I've requested the board for this item that was discussed at Cabinet on June 4th for a number of reasons, along with my 2 fellow ward councillors, also as graduates. Firstly, I feel the decision-making process was flawed. My concerns are that out of 10 Cabinet members present, only 2 spoke, and those 2 councillors were Councillor Small and Robbins. I felt that no one else had actually read the critically important report prior to taking a crucial decision that will affect so many people and damage Swindon's previous reputation as a protector of parks and open spaces. Now, bearing in mind that the council chamber, public gallery, function room and committee rooms were full of concerned residents and organisations, I got the impression that not only residents but ward councillors were ignoring what they said in defence of our objections. Myself and fellow ward councillors are grateful that the leader of the council has allowed public question time if Cabinet to go on for 1 hour and 54 minutes. And I'm sure he and all the other Cabinet members realised the anger of residents felt about what was being proposed and the huge disappointment made. I do find it hard to believe, though, that every Cabinet member voted in favour of this agenda item, based on the fact that a number of them admitted to not reading the report, and therefore you think about the well thought out and genuine objections. The Chief Legal Officer responded to my question as to whether Cabinet members who hadn't read the report should be allowed to vote, saying, members have to be satisfied that they have read the report in order for them to make a decision and vote. So, bearing in mind every Cabinet member voted to support the proposal, I don't believe that this is legal and is a reason number 1 for taking further action. And another thing to consider is the fact that Highworth Town Council submitted a plan, and again this has not been read, which strengthens the case for voting without knowledge of information. And for what Councillor Small has just said about the 7-year lease, did he go back to Highworth Town Council and say, we'll come back with something over 25 years, or did he just leave it at a 7-year lease? That's what everybody thought. There were 3 options in the report, and the only thing I discussed was option 3 to put out 700 houses. So, without options 1 and 2 being discussed openly, how can the conclusion be drawn that option 3 was the best? That to me comes across as a predetermined decision. Now, since the current administration has been in control of the Swindon Borough Council, they formed 3 new committees. Build a greener Swindon, build a better Swindon, and build a fairer Swindon. So, how on earth does removing a fantastic piece of open space and having 700 properties on it show that you want to be greener? I believe that this development proposal should have gone before at least one committees before even being considered by Cabinet. So out of the 3 build committees, I believe it should be discussed at the Build Agreed Swindon committee to get their thoughts. However, the key word in your 3 committees is build, build, build. I think that's the decision you've already made. I firmly believe that this decision was predetermined, as no consultation was done with the residents of Highworth or Highworth Town Council on their thoughts of 700 properties. I also find it hard to believe that, taking into consideration all of the other known developments currently taking place in Highworth, and those that the Borough Council planning team are currently aware of, that the education offer in Highworth of no additional school will be insufficient to cope. Bear in mind, Highworth pupils have no sixth form available to them in Highworth to do their A-levels. This means they need to travel into Swindon or Cirencester to do these, putting more pressure on both the pupils and the highways. Let's not forget also the pressures that will be placed on doctor surgeries, the highways infrastructure and utilities, etc. The fact that the leader said it would be illegal to lease this land to Highworth Town Council is also incorrect, and I believe that potentially could have influenced the Cabinet members to vote the way that they did. I would therefore request that this committee is referred back to Cabinet and to reassess and discuss once the Green Swindon Committee have had the opportunity to debate this in detail and produce a report for Cabinet. Ultimately, I believe that the Council Cabinet are no longer consider this potential development. Work with Highworth Town Council on a lease for the area, making it Swindon's 6th country park, as previously requested in motion on Council. 12th October 2023 from Councillor Mango, which I seconded. And I quote, agrees to designate Highworth Golf Course, that's the borough's 6th country park, and requests that officers work with Highworth Town Council to agree a long-term lease of £1 within 90 days. Sadly, this is deferred to Cabinet without debate, and that's the last time any of us were allowed to make a meaningful contribution. And I don't believe it wasn't debated to Cabinet, but I have been told it was, and it sent me. So, as I said, Chair, I honestly think this needs to be referred back to Cabinet, but prior to that, go to Green Swindon Committee. I do hope that the result that comes out of this meeting this evening. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question.
All councillors first, as part of the calling process, and then we'll open up to the main committee. Okay, point of order.
Oh, sorry, I'm still finding it useful. I just wondered if councillors do have a responsibility not to make accusations. Is there any sort of legal, I don't know, is there any limitation to what ward councillors can say in their speeches? Or they find to say?
It's fine when saying within reason, as long as they don't drift into accusations that we could rear into slander and bias and various other aspects of it, as you normally expect in public comments. So I would just ask members to be careful what they say, be mindful, but we are going to get that attitude. Councillor.
Thank you. Did you respond to around?
Do you want us to respond to the ward member?
If you'd like to, I didn't say here any specific questions.
I'm sure there was. There was quite a few. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to kind of summarise a response now.
To deal with first of all, the ratio of whether or not a 7-year, 25-year, 29-year lease. I can ensure the local member that longer leases were discussed with the town council, and whether or not they were to be able to achieve. And if you look at option 1, then a longer lease of 25 or longer than that, maybe 99 years, would have been put in place to deliver option 1. So therefore, the discussion did take place on if we were going to deliver option, then it would be on a longer term basis again. So therefore, those grants could be applied for to make it viable. I would point out a couple of other things. He talks about the education offer. First of all, the information given to us by the education team and by the consultant says that there are no additional education spaces will be required as part of this development, and we take that at face value, but the pre-plans will then relook at that to see if it is correct. Secondly, when he talks about sixth form provision, all sixth form provision bar St Joe's and Ridgeway, and that was done for political reasons at the time, ceased to take place since 1984. I know some schools have reused it since then, but they were taken away in 1984 by all secondary schools, and that's why in Swindon New College was set up. The other thing that he said is about a country park. I would repeat again and again and again that the town council has said to us on numerous cases they do not want the country park option. They want a nature reserve. And they have been quite emphatic about that because there are several reasons for that. The cost of actually running a formal country park to set up would be £3.5 million, with an annual running cost of a minimum of £150,000. And the town council, if the borough councillors for the area do not, that they have not got the resources available to set up a formal country park. That is why they wanted to go for the nature reserve option, which is a cheaper, more viable option, which would, in their opinion, preserve the golf course Highworth. So I think you need to be in touch with your town council when it comes to the fact that they have not putting forward a country park, they want a nature reserve.
Councillor Robbins. Thank you, Chair. Through you. I'm really surprised by some of Councillor Risinger's comments about the fact that we're discussing this and gone to one of the policy development committees. The reason we're discussing it is because Councillor Wisinger and Councillor Manroe put a motion into council that had financial impact, so it came to cabinet. Councillor Wisinger is perfectly at liberty to raise anything he wants on any of the policy development committees. It's not a cabinet role to do that. Those are backbench committees that we set up after we had experience of being in opposition, because we knew how difficult it was to get your item onto the agenda for the cabinet to look at. You could have taken it to that committee and been able to have those discussions, been able to come up with a recommendation for cabinet and drive it. But because you didn't understand when you put your motion in that just calling on us to do this was going to have a financial implication on the council, it's a rule that's been there all the time that you've been a councillor. That's why it came to cabinet. And that's why we're going through this process. And your point about us calling all of our committees, build a better Swindon, build a greener Swindon, build a fairer Swindon, we didn't do that. Our committees, when we came into power, were called Combating Inequality, Build a Better Swindon, and Achieving Net Zero. And it was only when we went out to consultation with the people of Swindon, and they told us that they wanted to change the names of those committees, that we changed them. So they're not our committees. They are ones that came out of the Swindon plan where we went out for consultation and listened to residents.
Thank you for all those comments. I'll just make the point of the committee titles have changed 3 times in 3 years. My question as a follow-up on that one, how many days was it between full council and the motion that was just been mentioned and cabinet considering a report?
Sorry, can you clarify that?
How many days between full council?
What full council?
When the motion was first deferred.
I can't remember when it was came to full council. You remember it?
Sure, yes. It's also a standing order 15 question of what that period is.
No, I asked you, what was the full council date?
2022. That's when I thought initially, when I talked about that.
We were in power in 2022.
We were 2023, sorry. And then Councillor Brown reported later on the amendment.
So the one which was reporting on for
the first step, as you just the first.
Both the motions have been since you've been there.
Yeah, but when was the one that Councillor Manroe, the latter one, which is what we're responding to?
Right through October 2023.
Approximately how many days between that and full council and cabinet?
We're 12th of October to the 17th of July, I think, the following year, so you can work out yourself.
224.
Thank you, I told you good.
During that period, did you discuss with ward councillors or the town council any part of that deferment?
I can't remember. I think the answer is yes, I did, but I'm not going to say that because I can't remember when I first had my first discussion with the town council was. So there's been many meetings with the town council, but I can't remember when the first one was. So I'm not going to say yes or no.
Okay. And ward councillors, did you talk to and involve
The
ward
answer
councillors?
is no.
Okay.
No.
So between that meeting this time last year and last month's, did you involve ward councillors in conversations prior to the publication of the final report?
Yes.
I'd like to contribute to that by saying we were actively excluded. We found out afterwards of meetings that happened on site where officers were present, talking about the biodiversity and the reports that were being produced. And those were on-site meetings which we very much would like to have been part of.
Yeah, they were not actively excluded. And to answer your question, the answer was yes.
Thank you. You weren't actively invited, so you didn't have any taking place.
Okay. Councillor Bailey, do you have anything else there?
That's a terminology.
Now I've said what I think I need to say.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair, committee members. I'm here to support the call in the Cabinet's decision on the Highworth Golf Course site and urge you to refer the decision back for a proper consideration. My points today tonight are evidence-based and distinct from those already raised by my ward colleague. First, the proposal directly contradicts both the adopted Swindon local plan and the Highworth neighbourhood plan. The land is designated as public open space and lies outside the settlement. SVC's own policy says such kit space can't be developed on if not replaced by which this policy, this plan does not deliver. Ignoring the adopted policy like this damages public trust and risks opening the floodgates to similar disregard elsewhere. Second, the council's commissioned report shows that restoring the site as a nature reserve could generate over £3 million in biodiversity net gain credits. That's not just environmental gain. It's an economic opportunity. The health benefits, the green space are well documented. Reduced stress in physical activity and lower pressures on the NHS services. There's long-term savings and well-being improvements in the borough that's desperately needed. Third and last, the justifications for the decisions hinged on this supposed 50% affordable housing offer, but it's not enforceable. The proposal admits that it depends upon a future exemptions application and further viability testing. So we may lose green space permanently for the promise that could evaporate once developers get to the table. In summary, this decision is legally shaky, financially short-sighted and environmentally backwards. I urge the committee to send it back to Cabinet and to demand proper scrutiny, policy alignment and community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of what Councillor Gardner said is correct in the sense about the biodiversity and the gain of around about £3 million. And there is, I wouldn't disagree with his argument about there is when retaining green open space about the environmental well-being and all the other benefits that an open space can have. I would reiterate what I said earlier that 58% of the site will remain as an open space as part of the nature reserve, and some of the most environmentally beneficial parts of that will still be in place. The opportunity for doing some of that net gain is still there, probably a large proportion of it. The 50% affordable housing issue, the advice given to us that because of the site is not in the local plan, then you have to look for exceptions for it to be, to go into the approval. And the going rate is up to 50%, and that's why that has been put in, and it's going towards pre-planning. That was part of the report that went to Cabinet. Financially short-sighted, I don't believe it is financially short-sighted, because this has always been about, at the end of the day, looking at the environmental against the financial constraints to the council, and we made it quite clear at the cabinet meeting, and you were there, so you know this, that one of the primary decisions for going for option 3 was because of the financial benefits it would give to the whole of Swindon, because of what the return would be. The issue of whether or not you would achieve 50%, which you said, which your comments were, that because of the nature of the land in the sense of it's outside of the local plan, then that requirement, the pre-planning will identify what is the minimum standard that's required for planning to go ahead, and then any developer would have to carry that out, because otherwise it then breaches the overall planning guidelines. So that would remain in place, but we are also striving for the 50% affordable if and when any development took place. Because I reiterate what I said earlier on, what the leader has said, that this at the moment is just going to pre-planning to get a professional view from the planning department on whether or not it is viable for any development to take place on that site.
Just Gardner, thank you. So you said 58%.
Yes.
All it was 52% that it's been talked about earlier. But 52, 58%, it's kind of here or there. The concern I have is the kind of the disingenuous approach to how you're portraying that, because as I think everyone in the room here saw in the report that was published to Cabinet, the pretty picture of the map and the bit that we were going to get, a lot of it that was coloured in wasn't even our land, SPC land. So it kind of was already trying to infer that we were going to get all this. We were not. It was not our land, it was farmers' land. The bit that we're referring to, you would get stuck in even with a good pair of hunter wellies. It's not. You can encourage some dragonflies, yes, but it's not as usable space as we're wanting to retain further up the hill. As far as doing the right by Swindon and the town as a whole, I think it would be a fairer conversation if we actually had cycle routes. If we had a way to be able to get into town that was beyond just one bus route. And just to remind, we don't have the luxury of hopping on a bus in Swindon, in Highworth, and getting off at Great Western Hospital, for example. We have to go through the hub, and it's a multiple hour journey. So it's really, not something we want to see taken away from us from the health benefits like you highlighted. So as a resource to Highworth that once gone, we're never going to see back, we want this decision scrutinised properly, which is why we're here and why we very much want to see it looked at again by Cabinet. Thank you.
Chair, just to come back on that. First of all, on the site plan, there is a clear red line going around the site which indicates which is part of the borough site and which is not part of the borough site. So therefore, the figures are, I would go, it's overall 58%, which is 12% open space and 46% nature reserve. So I did break that down. Talking about cycles, I believe, and I know this has been told me in the past, that when a cycle was proposed between, I'll say Stratton and Highworth, because roughly, it was opposed. This is some years ago, so that could have been in place some years ago. And on the other point, yes, I am why you're here tonight, and I have no criticism of you doing your job as a local ward councillor representing your area. If I was a representative, I would be doing exactly the same as you are tonight, representing the people and what they want. So I have no criticism of you being here holding us to account.
Anything else, Councillor Gardner?
I don't need to. No, good. Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. I fully agree with my two ward councillors, what they've said. What my questions or representation is that we are councillors here, represent our residents, and we should listen to their views. On the day of the decision, cabinet decision, the cabinet members were not aware of the background of the land, because I asked the question and you said you write to me about that question. The cabinet members were not aware the original owners of the land had put in the purchase agreement, the covenant, that this land is used for golf course or open space. and what you are recommending morally wrong, SBC should respect the views of the owners and the residents of Swindon. When you made the decision, there had been no traffic modelling done to confirm how the increased volume of traffic generated by developments will impact the highway network. I believe planning applications approved or being considered for nearly 1,000 houses in Highworth. And if we add 700 houses, that is nearly 1,700 houses to be built in Highworth in the next few years. Why spend public funds to consider building on the land without considering the impact on the infrastructure, schools, traffic, medical, doctor surgeries? How will the local schools and doctor surgery deal with the increase in Highworth residents? It is my plea to this committee to refer this back to the Cabinet to reconsider and also seek feedback from the Build Greener Swindon Committee. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of points. Sorry, apologies. Just a couple of points there, Chair. First of all, on the traffic modelling and the support services, they will be taken up as part of pre-planning considerations, and there's the right place to be dealing with those. They have the experts in it, will be able to tell us what is required to support this plan application being put forward. On the covenant, and I will. I'm 99% sure when I say this, that this was put in by Highworth District Council and the times of Highworth District Council, and when the service is then transferred to Thamesdown, the covenant was withdrawn or ceased to be in place. So therefore, it's no longer in place. I will 100% check that, and I will write to you if I'm wrong, but I'm 99% sure that is correct from the dialogue that I've had over the last year on this particular issue. I think I've covered everything else you raised.
Thank you. I'm a little confused, I think. So the process that we're going through is that we are discussing whether or not we send this decision back to Cabinet. But the decision we've made is for us to go and find out more information, which is going to inform our decision-making process, and then bring it back to Cabinet. So what you're asking us to do is go back to Cabinet to decide whether or not we get that further information, and then go back to Cabinet. It just doesn't really seem to make sense. The sensible thing for us to do is go and get that information, and then bring it back to Cabinet, and we'll all have a discussion again. The residents of Highworth will be able to see all of that information, be able to read it and understand it, be able to make representations to us, and then we'll be able to make a decision. I don't really understand what the point you're asking us to do is, because we're still going to have the same information that we've currently got if it goes back to Cabinet, whereas if we go forward, we've got an understanding that we can move forward with a full set of information to make a sensible decision from the pre-planning process.
I'm confused, Councillor Robbins. There's no mention of a further report in your agreed recommendations. It's a delegate progressing the scheme to their property access. How are you intending to make that commitment?
It's not.
Well, it is.
No, it's not. A report has to come back to Cabinet before it goes any further. They only take it up to the pre-planning outcome, and then it's reported back to Cabinet.
Councillor Monroe?
Thank you. I think the point I'm trying to make is Swindon Borough Council spending public funds for something that may not happen. Why do you want to spend the public funds? Why don't you do the traffic modelling first?
Wait.
Basically, one that would cost money as well, so therefore you're. Secondly, that's the best time to do that is during the pre-planning element. We have money put aside for this work when we're looking to for the disposal of property within the Borough Council. There's a budget each year for that, and if we were to then sell the land, then we would recoup the money through the capital receipt. But I would point out again, as I said, at the moment, this is work, and to explain the work, once planning the pre-planning has done all its work, and that's what the officers have been charged with doing, taking it up to that point, a report will come back to Cabinet for a final decision on whether or not we then dispose of the land or do something else with it. As I said, the report might be that houses can't be built on it.
No, thank you. Okay, I'll open to Councillor member of the committee because he was named on the call, and I'll go to Councillor Davis.
So as a member of the committee, I'm not going to speak to call in. I've come here tonight with a clear mind and a full set of questions. So, you know, the first thing I'd like to say is that I'm minded to agree with the members of the public so far. I was disappointed to see the list of questions we essentially couldn't ask. And I'm minded to agree that I wish we could, but I do respect the advice given to us by our officers. That's what we're employed to do. So I'm going to follow it, but I am, yeah, I will follow it, but I move on. The key tendency of this administration seems to be initially focused around openness and transparency. It's one of the key goals that they set out for themselves is to be open, essentially more open and more transparent than they believe the previous administration was. To that point, given tonight it's been admitted that the decision was made in a private meeting between cabinet members, can I ask, was there anybody present at this meeting that wasn't an SBC member or a cabinet member?
The decision was made at the cabinet meeting on the 4th of June, where I think there were about 200 people from Highworth in the room.
No, you clearly stated, as far as I can remember, and I'm happy to be corrected if somebody can find it, that the decision was made previously, pre-meeting.
I discussed it at pre-meeting, but the decision was made at the cabinet meeting on the 4th of June.
Okay, so can you answer my, so moving on, yeah, I know it's like as well, but he disagrees. So can you answer my question still? Was there anybody at that meeting that wasn't a cabinet member or a member of SNC?
Yes, there was 200 people from Highworth.
No, at pre-meeting. At the pre-meeting that you had.
Which one?
Well, I don't know, the one that you said that you've been having.
Well, we have political cabinet on a Wednesday every other fortnight, and in the week in between we have an informal cabinet. The informal cabinet has got members of the office team in it, and those are the discussions that we have as a cabinet. It's very standard, it's very similar to what the previous administration did. You have some of your meetings in public and some of your meetings in private. It's not a big revelation or a magic bullet that is going to change the decision. That cabinet system works.
So at the meeting nearest to the public meeting that you had in private, was there anybody present that wasn't an SBC officer or a member of the cabinet? No. How can we know that? There's no record.
Can you just ask?
I mean, I can take your, I'll take the answer at face value, but as a member of the public sitting here watching, how can they know that there wasn't anybody else at that meeting?
How do you think, if we allowed the public in every single meeting that we have, that we would ever be able to get anything done? The way that the council works is we have officers who give us advice and guidance because they're experts in their field. We are elected representatives and we work with them to come up with processes. And then when we make our decisions, we do it in public with the through the committee structures that we put in place as the council. That's how the council works. It's not new or different or somehow us trying to hide the decision-making process. This is just how the council works. It's politics 101.
So I referred to my previous point that you did mention at the beginning of this meeting during one of the questions that was asked firstly, that a decision was made at a private meeting.
That is not what I was trying to say. If I said that, well, we had those discussions, and we have those discussions on a number of issues. There are always conversations that are going on where the cabinet meet to discuss issues that are facing the town and decide what we take forward. Then those are commonplace, but the decision that was made on Highworth was made in the room on the 4th of June.
Okay, just to cut out, I'll just step in and say, Leader, you did confirm in public questions that the cabinet discussed and agreed contents of the report in a pre-meeting before it was published.
That's how the process is made and the report.
If you let me finish the question, and that the main cabinet was performative to listen to the public and make the final decision. So what would have changed your mind on the night?
If there had been information from the public that made us think going out to get that information from the pre-planning process was not going to be necessary, and I heard nothing that made me think.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Public, I'm afraid you do need to kind of keep it contained.
Unbelievable.
With no questions raised by any cabinet member in public session, how does scrutiny in the public know what potential options, issues and options were considered when they are committee report?
Well, I answer that thing, Chair. Since the report was required to produce, the report was required on 3 options. That was the instruction to it by the cabinet meeting of the previous year. And that's why the report had those 3 options, because that was what was required of it from responding to the initial motions put forward by lower councillors.
If I remember the conversations at the time, that report was not allowed to be called in because it's further work to come forward. So how could any member have been involved or scrutinise those original 3 options during this process? It sounds like at no time has been any opportunity to validate or query or scrutinise why those particular 3 options until this late stage.
The cabinet meeting was open to everyone. People could have come along, board members could have come along to that cabinet meeting and asked that question. Members of the committee could have come along, members of the public could have come along. When that cabinet meeting took place, we set those 3 options, and that was the decision that we made, and no one challenged it.
Councillor Davis and Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the public. So, having reviewed the minutes for the last few meetings in cabinet, are all available on the website. It looks like in each of those meetings, a particular report is proposed by the relevant cabinet member, and then the leader backs up the decision and the reason for taking it. Just to clarify, were there any significant differences between the process for the decision we're talking about today and the other 3 to 4 key decisions that are taken by each cabinet meeting? And are there any differences with the way the decisions have been taken over the last 5 to 10 years?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to elaborate, Cato confidence prior to your administration, it's the same process at all stages.
I can't know what happened in the private and confidential meetings that were taken by the previous administration, but certainly when I was leader of the opposition, I attended a number of cabinet meetings. Some of those decisions were debated, some of those, they were just the person who put forward the report, made their report, and then they went to the decision. Some would second it, and then it would go to the decision.
Thank you. So it's not quite definitive yes, no, as you acted with Councillor Davis.
I don't think it's materially different.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. One is, in terms of the previous administration, we generally did have more of a debate, I believe. We had a number of cabinet meetings. And Councillor Robbins alluded to this earlier. I think there is a necessity to perhaps take a different view so that the public sees a little bit more debate, and I credit to you for recognising that. My question in terms of the decision made on the 3 options, and this was alluded to by Councillor Manray, I can't imagine for 1 second 1,700 homes in Highworth not requiring educational facilities. And when the plan was put forward some years ago for potential inclusion in the local plan, and it was then voted on unanimously by both your side and ours to report in the local plan. That draft plan had included a school because it would recognise that that additional number of homes would put pressure on Highworth, and with the additional homes here, it means that the financial balancing that decision benefit to Swindon Council for the whole of the borough might not be as rosy if you're having to find space on that site, which members have acknowledged is somewhat in places. You either lose houses or you place a school in an appropriate location on the site. So my question is, did you take that into account? And I do question your statement that the education place planning had said that £1,700 or £700 on their own does not require any additional education service.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I, like you, was surprised because originally I was expecting the 700 not to be viable because it would trigger educational placements or a school on that particular site. But the reason it wasn't because the advice given to us was that it wasn't required, which I was surprised about, but that was the advice given to us. So I'm hoping that part of the pre-planning will actually clarify. I think what would happen is that if there is any, shall we say, double counting because of the other developments going on, like in Swindon Road, almost like not be counted fully in sense of, oh, we got the 700 will equate to that. Yes, we've got another placement, but I've forgotten to add the Swindon Road. The planning team will be able to pick that up and identify that as part of the pre-planning stage, and then we'll then identify whether or not an additional school or additional places is required within the Highworth area. But the advice given is that we don't need it. And I would also add to that, Chair, is that to me, I'd rather if they did, then we'd be doing if that was the case. Right? So there's no reason for covering up the reason for this, because if it was there, then what would we carry forward? Because it wouldn't be viable, you're right. So the only reason it's in here, the option that we've gone forward with it to this stage is because the professional advice given to us when making this, looking at these options was that it wasn't required.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask a question, Councillor Small. So obviously the report was very comprehensive and you spent 12 months working on it. Not all consideration made to the options we could hear tonight. So I was just wondering, because it's been such a lengthy process, would there be any other pieces of information that were significant and they didn't make it to the final report? If you could elaborate on that, that would be much appreciated.
If you look at what's the agenda paper tonight and what the actual possibilities of sending it back to look at the 7-year option, the reason why that wasn't ever considered because it was not a viable option to go forward, would not achieve the goals, aims and goals of the business plan for the Penn Council and the Nature Reserve. And so that was never achievable, and that's why it didn't go any further. The other option, and the Town Council looked at one time at going to consider the land on the next, which was they had a deal with the Borough Council. It was talk about giving that back, trying to and then save the land at the golf course. When you look at the valuations of the two and everything else, it wasn't a viable option again for us for consideration, and that's why it's taken forward. The other areas we looked at as part of the ecology report, in the sense that they looked at all the options which are available, and that's why you've got them. And it's not just about the Nature Reserve Park, Country Park, all those. It wasn't just one looked at. And the other two, then option 2 and 3, were the difference in size of the houses to be on the site. We also looked at trying to, as part of option 2, initially when the original plans come back, that there wasn't. It was a bit more scattered. You know, option 2 and the 400, we were saying that it need to be down by onto the Swindon Road, therefore kept a larger scale element of the site for public use. So all those were looked into as part of the consideration before coming up with the options, which went to committee.
Just picking up on the school conversation, referring to some literature that our one and only secondary school Walford put out only last week, and this isn't new information. What makes us unique? We're a small, oversubscribed school where your children will be known. It goes on, lots of lovely things to be said, and actually, you know, disclaimer, I send my son there. But the takeaway is oversubscribed. Now, I'm not currently a governor of a primary school, but I was for many years in Highworth, and I'm acutely aware from a primary school perspective that placements are difficult at managing them, and that's working with Swindon Borough for the allocation. And there was an awful lot of compromising discussions over
we're going to have to squeeze classes, mix year groups, all of this to be able to accommodate the pressures that SVC were putting upon the existing schools in Highworth. Now, fast forward to today, and I've been a governor for a couple of years, but what's happened? We've grown a few hundred homes here, a few hundred homes there. We have not increased the number of schools. And so the primary school situation can only have gotten worse, I can imagine. But no, the secondary school are announcing to everyone that they're oversubscribed. So to think that a decision was made at Cabinet last month that was based upon, well, we've been told that there's capacity, so it's not a problem. I would strongly suggest that should alone drive the decision back to Cabinet for consideration with all of that.
Can I just first of all stop you there? The decision was made based on the education numbers at the Cabinet meeting. It was, and I will reiterate what I said to the Leader of the Opposition, is that the pre-planning will take up the capacity issues and look into it. The advice we were given from the Education Department was that there was no need for an education division on site, which we thought would be originally applicable. That is the advice that was given. No decision on development has been made. It is to take it to the pre-planning application stage, where all the issues which you are raising tonight, and one of those would be the education. And as I said to the Leader of the Opposition, it is also about we're taking into account any other development which may not have been taken when they've given us their opinion. We'll take it forward and come back to us as part of their opinion for the site, and whether or not they're going to take it forward will be subject to another Cabinet decision.
I don't believe that the £30,000 budget that obviously is already spent for the selling off of assets doesn't get spent until the groundwork around finding out about educational support needs, cover and capacity is covered off. But that's the takeaway I hope to get from that.
All elements of necessary supports for the development will be covered by the pre-planning stage.
Thank you. Other members wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll start asking my question. I always are, I'm afraid. Okay, I will have a run. So to apply to be a country park is free. And there's a criteria of 10 points, which include it needs to be at least 10 hectares, signposted, intersections. Why wasn't any of this information listed in the report or considered as an option rather than going for a potential gold-plated approach?
I think we've already answered that, Chair. One, the town council do not want a country park, and the costings are very expensive. Set one-off cost is around about £3.5 million, and the ongoing year-to-year is a minimum of 150,000, making it very, very difficult for any town council to be able to run a country park. There are a lot more requirements for setting up a country park, in the sense of full infrastructure to support that country park, which are not required if you have an informal nature reserve or something similar to that.
So why didn't Cabinet consider just keeping the whole entirety of the site as a nature reserve?
It was as part of the option one.
But earlier you said that the work hadn't been completed.
No, I haven't.
Do you only progress option 2 and 3 with any detailed plan?
No, I didn't say that. I said options 1, 2, and 3. I had a report. I already quoted, Chair, that the in-depth report given by the ecologist, which covers option 1. So those were looked into detail, and some of the figures I just is part of that option appraisal. So they were done in detail. So I think you're misleading by saying that we didn't do any work on option 1, which
I made notes as you were talking, so I could play it back to you.
Well, it's in the sense you've misunderstood.
When do you expect Cabinet to receive a further report?
Not known at the moment, Chair, but it could be 6 to 8 months.
Do you think that there is sufficient clarity on the recommendations agreed by Cabinet? Because reading them out, there's no sign of a report further to come back. Cabinet has agreed to approve the head of property asset progress option on the site being developed as a housing scheme of up to 700 residential units, providing up to 50% affordable housing with the remainder of the site on the master plan appendix 1. That's the first recommendation we've agreed. The second is to prove that the head of property assets progressive scheme on the basis that will be considered by way of a planning pre-application per site, providing a threshold, That, from my reading of it, is you have delegated to the head of property assets to progress a scheme. There's nothing in terms of what I've heard tonight that says a report is coming back, that there's to be further consideration. You have, as a cabinet, approved delegation to the head of property assets to progress a scheme.
A report will come back to cabinet before any final decision is made, Chair.
Councillor Road.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, I would like to refer you to the Rounds Hill Needs portal application, where the education officer said, by building 250 houses, we'll need 11 additional children per year group. Taking the above into consideration, and also there are no alternative schools or within safe walking distance threshold, education would see contribution towards primary education. And that still hasn't been built, is outlined. Going to secondary, they're saying primary contribution required 2.5 million, secondary contribution required 2.2 million, SEND requirements 500k, and this is on public portal. So why was that not considered?
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to read to you from the Swindon Schools Place Planning Study that talks about the total demand for additional school places in what they call the rural north area, which is Highworth, Inglewoodsham and Hannington. And it talks about the demand for school. At the moment, it's saying that the current capacity September 2023 was 4.5, and the total future demand for places by 2028 was 4.1 full forms of entry. So there is currently around a full form of entry available in primary schools around there, and for secondary school, they've currently got 5 forms of entry out in September 2023, and even with the demand for new housing growth, they expect that to be at 3.7 forms of entry. So they're saying that they expect supply to meet demand by 2028. And in the commentary for it, the demand at Highworth Launchwood Academy has been steadily declining since 2018-19, with further decline on rolled forecast. Highworth Launchwood School as an academy, and as such, has varied their parameters, the pupil admission number, over previous years based on the available capacity in the school. So I assume that the bit that you were reading was where the school has changed their pupil number to try and show that there is still demand for the school. But certainly from reading it seems to suggest that there isn't that need for future schools at the moment. But certainly we will take that into account through the pre-planning process and make sure that that is addressed in any future reports.
Councillor Manro and Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I think I'm reading from the planning portal, Swindon Borough Council planning portal, where the education officer has made the comment that this is what the requirement is for the 250 dwellings, which is outline application for erection of up to 250 dwellings, land east of Round Hills Mead, Lexlade Road, Highworth.
Yeah.
And these 7 extra to these 250.
The school-based planning study is saying that there is still slack in the system for the existing homes that are planned and future new homes in the area.
Well, I'm reading what the officer has said.
This is the Swindon School Place Planning Study, which is done by the Education.
Councillor Gardner.
The planning study done in 2023. Now, since then, a lot has been discussed. The 700 homes is just the icing on the cake. The additional cluster of almost 1,000 homes, which also includes this 250, is what we're very concerned about. So on top of the study that says it's all just about okay with this capacity, things have happened in the last 24 months that have brought us to a point where several hundred homes have already been delivered. I'm thinking of Shortland Road and of the down by the Shell Station and Swindon Road, where there's been considerable developments released to the market. And the number, which is for a fresh application with commentary based upon the now, from a Swindon officer absolutely tells us a different story. So referencing a 2023 study doesn't mean an awful lot.
I think the point I'm trying to make is this is the official council document that looks at planning numbers for schools until 2028, and it says there's 200 spaces and how informed by that plan. There are 40 in every year group that are available. Now, we need to go through this and do it properly when we go through that pre-planning exercise, and that's exactly what will happen. But I don't think that there's enough there for us to say that we shouldn't go through that and do the work. And what we're suggesting is that we go and do the work and look at it and get this information so that we can make an informed decision. I don't see why that would be a problem.
Very, very.
I'm letting this kind of run a little bit. It's Councillor Davis.
Very good question. The report you're referencing dated, or is it not 23?
No, it's dated 2024 to 2028, but it was using data from 2023 at the start.
So yes, it was dated.
And going to Councillor Munro's point is that the planning application refers to how much of that is affordable housing.
I haven't seen that. I just looked at the education report.
But I think you need to take that into consideration about your overall contribution from the development as well, before we make quoted figures. And I would also point out, Chair, again, it's, the pre-planning will deal with all of these issues.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that the school figures need to be updated, because I do think they are out of date. So I do think that's something that really does need to be done, sooner rather than later. And Councillor Small just touched on affordable housing. On June 4th, he couldn't define what affordable housing was. So, I'd love to know from either an officer, what you said about state, I look at figures to be put in the report as to what affordable housing is going to be in Highworth with any developments. And I'm not saying that you should provide that yourself, because like you said, you're not a state agent, but it's easy to say affordable housing, but, it's, I would like the figures to be specified, so somebody knows, oh, well, look, I can see there's going to be houses coming up in Highworth, and they're going to be starting at 75,000. Yes, I can look at those. Otherwise, affordable housing could start at 400,000. First-time buyers not going to be able to afford 400,000.
I think the areas are all relative, as I said in the cabinet meeting, and I'm not an expert on this, but the commitment is for affordable housing, and they will have to be in context affordable housing.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. We just had a 10-minute, I think, segue into schools, which is something I care a lot about and is really important. But I would bring us back to the fact that the decision we're taking is whether the option of the site tenancy for 7 years to Highworth Town Council is enough of grounds to ask Cabinet to adjust their original decision. I think I would move that unless there are significant extra points to make about that particular, then I would move to confirm the original decision.
It's not quite for tonight. It's up to the committee to decide how it wishes to approach it, and whether that is the correct, the agreed alternative, or if there are others available. But obviously we have one motion to approve on the table. I will continue the debate so we can come back and naturally do this. So, members wish to say anything else? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite new to this committee. It's my first meeting tonight. But I'm quite passionate about scrutiny. And I think that scrutiny can add more value when it's done before the decision is taken, or actually, a committee can have a look and make recommendations. Obviously, on this one, I think should and there's lots of learnings. But I would suggest, if I may, that when the next report comes out, which is supposed to go to Cabinet, that the scrutiny would look at that report. And that probably would be better opportunity for us to, to make recommendations, so then Cabinet can consider those recommendations.
So thank you. That is one aspect that we can approach. Does require the support of Cabinet to present that to the committee. The last time we did this, there wasn't sufficient information to really do anything. So, for instance, the outline business plan was not provided. Following week, it went to cabinet, and it was then included as an appendix. So it's something that we as a council do need to improve and work through, and hopefully the cabinet member can take comments on board that there are better ways than simply pushing it through cabinet, particularly involving local board members out the process, not once the report's been agreed in a private session.
Chair, can I just remind you, the instruction was from council, the cabinet to deal with it?
It was deferral from the full council and the constitution. Cabinet decision for 3 options. That decision was not subject to call-in as it was not allowed. And this is the first opportunity to go through that.
I've got no problem today, Chair. I was saying that the decision to deal with cabinet was because instruction came from council.
It wasn't instruction from council, it was an automatic deferral based on the constitution. But Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer the question that was asked about the affordable houses, a policy compliant level of affordable housing, i.e. 30% of total number of homes to be built. So there will be 30% affordable houses.
That difference, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Members wish to say anything else at this time? Okay. Is there anything that the cabinet member can provide further to the committee around the decision process? My particular concern is the lack of clarity on the agreed recommendations of cabinet and what you really delegated doesn't align with the comments tonight. Are you happy to provide further assurances to this committee that we can note in our recommendations about that there will be a future cabinet meeting on this topic?
I'm more than happy to give you that assurance. Yeah. It will be no decision on whether or not any application or any land sale goes forward until the cabinet reports come to cabinet, and it will be a decision of cabinet. So there will be a report on the pre-application stage back to the cabinet will make a final decision. And I'm happy to give you that confirmation here this evening, and happy for it to be minted. To go on to then just to sum up then, Chair, looking to the core of what actually can be considered tonight, which is the 7-year lease. I think earlier on I quite made it clear it wasn't a viable option to be considered because it did trigger the necessary funding avenues which would be needed to support the business plan for the town council's proposals. The nature reserve needs long-term investment and long-term stability, which only a minimum of 25 years can achieve. And the option 1, if it would have achieved that, because option 1 would have been looking at whether for the nature reserve would have been looking for a 25-year plus, maybe 99 years. That still had to be discussed in detail between legal, legal, town council and everything else. But also the option of a joint venture in the sense of us going together in partnership where we retain the ownership of the land, but then committed to the nature reserve as part of working with the town council to deliver that. That was all part of the discussion that took place. So I think that the reason why it was included in the report because it was not a viable option which was supported by either party.
Okay, Councillor
just to come back on that point, so the 7-year lease situation, there were assumptions made just then by Councillor Small that were, I guess, made on behalf of HTC, but I understand it that Highworth Town Council were never consulted on the 7-year lease. So the affordability and the ability and commenting about the 25-year lease minimum to get certain grants, there is assumptions baked into that because it was never raised to discuss in recent times with Highworth Town Council.
That's not correct.
They very much like
that's not correct. Yeah.
Been involved
we had regular meetings with the representatives of Highworth Town Council, and in those meetings it was clear that the only way the grants could be accessed was from a longer term lease. And that's why the 7-year lease is not a viable option, because the grant, wasn't just about time for the grant. The grant had a time period over which it had to be delivered, and there had to be a a feedback, a payback period over 25 or 25 years. I think one of them might have been 30 years that was being looked at. So those grants would not be, they would not be able to apply for those grants because there wasn't a long enough lease to. That's why, and that was discussed with the town council in our meetings when we were looking at the various options. So yes, it was covered, and that's why we were going for long-term lease. We would have gone for needed long-term lease.
Through the chair, as I've been a town councillor for over a decade and a borough councillor for the ward for over 2 years, were these the secret meetings that we were not invited to?
They were meetings of representatives from the borough council, which is myself, and sometimes Councillor Grant, and representatives in the town council. It was up to the town council to decide which representatives they brought. I believe you had a working group that was set up to deal with it.
Just on this point,
can I just say though, Chair, that throughout this process, and I've said it at the cabinet meeting, and I will say it again, the town council have done a sterling job in representing the people of Highworth. They have made it clear that they are totally opposed to any development on this site from the start to the finish, and they've really represented the people of Highworth well, and so they should be praised for that. So they've never betrayed the people of Highworth, even in these discussions. Anybody thinks they are, that's wrong. But when we discussed it, what was, when you start these things, you're fishing, aren't you? Looking, what can we achieve? Is there some way of achieving these different things? And the 7-year one was cut out almost early, or a short-term lease was cut out because it wouldn't be able to apply for the grants. So that was part of the discussion. That's what's come back to us as the reason for not doing it.
just on that particular point with what you said about involving the town council, so why didn't you go to the same length to work with local board elected members?
Because the town council had a business plan here. It was their business plan, not the ward councillors. I accept that we should probably keep them more informed, and I'm taking that on the chin. I didn't have my commitment that I would speak to them and go through the report before it came to be published, and that was what we carried out, and we did do so.
Do you think this is a good example of leadership, collaboration, and transparency working across party?
There was hard work put in between ourselves and council, who representing the people of Highworth. I accept that we could have done more than the ward councillors.
Councillor Marrow, Councillor Weisinger, and then unless there's any new points, we'll kind of wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Small, you admitted here today that the decision the cabinet made was financially based, right? Did you in option one consider selling other assets to make that financial gain?
The only option on the table was the consideration for the future of the old Highworth golf course, which as a result of your motion went to full council. If your motion hadn't gone to full council, then it would have been taken as part of the overall asset review and probably within 2 years down the line.
On that point then, so you confirmed that the primary consideration was financial, yet there's no mention of that financial case in the public documents. Why can't the case for change be made in that and the commercials remain confidential?
The case, Chair, is that it cleared in the questions I answered to the members of the public on the last occasion. The reason why we were considering option 3 was based on the fact that we had to look at the overall financial position of the council, the well-being of the people of Highworth, the overall issues of the green space opportunities which option 1 delivered against what the financial returns would give us for option 2 and option 3. And the weighting, in our opinion, was that option 3 was the one to go for because the financial restraints which were placed between the borough council were making it of a greater need for the overall well-being of the borough, and that's what we took as final argument put forward for going for option 3. And I made that clear quite clearly on numerous occasions during the 2 hours of public question time.
Would you like to say anything about those financial constraints that the council faces tonight for all members and the public?
I don't need to add from what I said at Cabinet, Chair.
Okay, I'll therefore ask you, what are those financial considerations in the future years? Will we need a second year of exceptional financial support from the council?
I would suggest that you refer to the decision made at the budget meeting in February, which you were there, Chair, and you know as well as I do that there are financial issues facing this council, but whether or not we have to face any further budgetary strains, it's not for the scrutiny committee this evening, it's for cabinet and for full council.
But it's part of your case that's, you've referred to the report, which is why it opens up that question.
I don't think it does, Chair, thank you.
Councillor Weisinger?
Thank you, Chair. The 7-year option not being long enough in your discussions with Highworth Town Council, did you give Highworth Town Council the option to say, come back to me with X amount of time with an extended term agreement and what you can do over that, or did you just accept that? But you felt 7 years wasn't long enough.
It wasn't us, Chair, that was saying 7 years wasn't long enough. Clearly the message coming from the 10 council representatives was that a longer lease was required so they could gear in to get the additional funding to make the nature reserve a viable option and deliver their business case. It was never about, it was always about the fact that the town council wanted a nature, and that was the primary thing, to protect that land for the people of Highworth. And it was about then how does option 1 deliver that? Option 1 could not be delivered on a 7-year lease because of the fact that it would not trigger necessary funding mechanisms to support the town council's business plan. It was nothing to do about what we were offering. It was about the fact that if you're considering it, which is what was all these things were considered in the discussion, that it would not be a viable option for the business case, and therefore the nature reserve would then not be a viable option either.
Okay, thank you. And the other question would be, so if this was, let's switch roles, and you're Highworth Town Council, one of the borough councillors, one of 3, would you be happy if this was happening at your ward and you were excluded from communications as a ward councillor and not involved in discussions that's going to go to something like cabinet? Because I personally feel that ward councillors should be involved in any decisions made on whichever party is in the administration. I do feel that we have, as 3 ward councillors, we have that capacity.
The latter part I think I've already dealt with. The first part, I think when I answered the question to Councillor Gardner, I fully understand the position you've taken as ward councillors, and I have no objection to it, because as I said, if I was in your position, people of Highworth, I'd be doing exactly the same thing.
Councillor Robbins.
I totally agree with Councillor Small that there are lessons that we should learn about trying to keep ward councillors more included. It is something that we complained about when we were in opposition, and we don't get it right all the time. We haven't seen it all the time, and we don't get it right. But I would also say that I haven't had a single email from any of the ward councillors about Highworth Town Golf Course asking me to have a meeting with them. I've just checked again, and I haven't had anything.
Councillor.
It's only small, but there have been emails, because I recall one meeting which was wrongly subject line addressed as a site meeting, and there's 3 of us, 2 or 3 of us were stood in the rain on the golf course waiting, and about 5 minutes passed thinking, where are they? We ring around this building, and you're sat in an office here waiting for us. Because it was about the site, not on the site. So there were email conversations, and we were desperate to want to talk to you.
You can email me anytime I have a conversation. My door is metaphorically always open, not physically. Sometimes I have a conversation with you.
Okay, Councillor Mina, looks like you're saying something?
No.
Any final points? Otherwise, we then go to conclusions of the committee. No, didn't finish their routing as we get just to 8:20. As we're kind of going along, there's probably 2 or 3 points to discuss as a committee. Councillor Davis has moved that we confirm the decision of Cabinet. The 3 available ones to the committee are confirm the original decision, refer the decision back to Cabinet for reconsideration, to reasonably practical, for which we have to provide reasons, or refer the matter to full council. Are members happy to second the proposal from Councillor Davis, and are there any alternatives?
Happy to say Councillor Davis.
Any other alternative motions? Solo?
I think based on obviously some of the perhaps slips of the tongue tonight and the arguments made by I would suggest referring the decision back to Cabinet for reconsideration as soon as possible, because the leader has given evidence tonight appear to show that decisions were made prior to the meeting. The agreed recommendations of Cabinet align with comments of the Cabinet.
Okay, any members to second that? Councillor Adams. Any other points to be made? I'm afraid, well, no, Councillor Adams. No, it's convention that we kind of do things as the recommendation change, then we'll go for the recommendation of confirming if that is what happens. Same kind of way as we see in the planning process. So we'll first move the refer decision back to Cabinet for consideration. The Chief Legal Officer is certain that we should be moving the first motion that came forward and not consider anything else until that passes or fails. So all those in favour of confirming the original decision, so it's effective from the date of the meeting. All those opposed? Therefore, the decision of scrutiny is to confirm the original decision. Therefore, the second motion falls because it's no longer viable. As a further part of that, we did talk, and it was confirmed by Councillor Small that it was happy for this committee to have a further note that Cabinet will be considering a further report on the future of Highworth golf course as a result of that pre-application process. So while it is not mentioned in the report, I think it's necessary for this committee to have that assurance made, and we minute it ourselves. So all those in favour of minuting, that's a key part of our conclusions tonight. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. I believe that is the agenda item for tonight. There's nothing further in terms of work programme. So thank you everybody for your patience, and Katie, I will see you next week to go through the committee.